Take it away, Dr. Chazan.
Thank you. Well, let me welcome you all, old and new participants, to a deliberation. We'll call it a sikha. Later on, others will pronounce the word differently, but I think we're talking about the same thing. I know all of us have spent a lot of time on Zoom. And normally when we've spent time on Zoom, it's meetings or it's deliberations, it's discussions, and our days, as it were, are filled up with Zoom. And I have to say this is different. What's happening here is a dynamic that really began a half a year ago. We had our first deliberation a couple of months ago, and I have to begin with a bracha and a todah to a dear colleague, Rabbi Menachem Schmidt, who I have known for a long time. He's one of my rabbis, and the opportunity to talk with him and think together with him, and our minds kick around things, and we have some connections. By the way, recently was his birthday, so we're dedicating today to his birthday, Menachem. But he has always been interested in the broader notion of the Jewish people, which is something that ignites me. It's always ignited me, and it's going to keep igniting me. So at a certain point, we said, wouldn't it be interesting if we could bring together a bunch of interesting people? We give them their all fancy bibliographies, but we put them aside, and we all just are names here now. By the way, we are in diverse parts of North America. We're in Germany, we're in England, we're in Israel at the moment, Canada. And we thought the opportunity to talk about shaping or reshaping Jewish education in the 21st century is an exciting challenge. It's a sphere of Jewish life that has gone through dramatic metamorphoses, from biblical times to rabbinic times to post-modernity, and certainly American life constitutes one of the major dramatic metamorphoses. So we thought it would be worthwhile if a bunch of us could get together periodically to deal with these issues. We purposely don't have titles in front of anybody, and particularly denominations. Indeed, sometimes I have felt, as much as I understand why there are denominations in American Jewish life, sometimes I feel it's been so limiting. It always was painful for me when I would go into a conservative or a reform institution and I'd say, what's your goal? And they would say to create a conservative Jew or to create a reform Jew. So that was the birth of this framework. As I say, this framework is, you want to know the criteria how you get in? You be a friend of Menachem or me. That's how it goes. We want people who are alive, who think. Also, what was terribly important to us was to be cross-generational. And we have today some fabulous representatives of not denominational, age differences. And actually the one missing, and he apologizes, is my son Idan, who was torn between a course, I know, Max, would you believe torn between this and a course he's taking on medieval religion? So I apologize, but I will tell him what it's all about. So here is today's schedule. Again, the overall presenting issue of this deliberation and our deliberations is, how can we make use of the wise thinking, writings, thoughts of great voices from the past and the present to ameliorate and to improve something that also is a great creation. American Jewish education is an important creation. What voices can help us explicate it? There has been a movement which focuses very much on John Dewey and on voices of Howard Gardner, and there is great, I think it's legitimate, Israel Scheffler, to go to the general voices who are important educational figures. But within our own tradition, there have been some very significant and important voices to hear. So that's what today is about. We are going to, we have two wonderful teachers, and we're going to ask them to teach. Menachem, correct me. Are we going to do one quick round where everybody says their name and where they're from? Good point, Menachem. Unmute yourself. That means he agrees. So we'll go quickly, and from that, right after that,
Sorry.
Menachem, right? We're going to have everybody.
Yeah, right. Yeah, please.
Yeah, you
Sorry,
see how soft-spoken he is? So just give your name and where you're from, and we'll start on the time. We'll start with actually Avidan. And right after that, Erica Brown, you know everything about all these people, will be teaching us. And then after that, Zohar, Raviv. And then the bulk of our time together is questions, comments, and reflections. So write down notes and be prepared after our teachers teach us to make comments. So Avidan Halivni, what's your name and where are you?
My name is Avidan Halivni. I hail from Chicago, and I am currently in Berlin, where I work as the program manager with the Masorti movement and also on the education team with Base Berlin Hillel Deutschland. And I have to say, it's an absolute honor to be part of this group. Many of these faces on the screen I count as my teachers or future teachers or a cappella alumni, co-alumni. And I'm really grateful to be here and to be invited.
Thank you. Ira.
Hi everyone, I'm Ira Glasser. I'm currently in Plainview, New York. I'm the director of Jewish Life and Learning at Rhoda Shalom School. Avidan, it's nice to see you again in a very different context. And I'm to echo what Avidan said, it's truly an honor and a privilege to be part of this this conversation.
Erica, is it an honor and privilege for you?
It is such an honor. It's a great way to start Monday, a nice snow day. So I feel like it's snow day, but I get to go to special school and be with all of you. And I don't have many occasions to really step back and reflect on education through this lens. And this is really new for me. So thank you for having me.
Zohar from Eretz Yisrael.
Shalom, shalom from Eretz Israel, from my living room in Kfar Sirkin, not far from Tel Aviv. It's an honor and a joy. I want to just say Toda Rabba to Menachem, who was very consistent and delightful in his email and details. And Mazal Tov to you, Menachem, on your birthday today. Od harbe shanim tovot ubriot. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Erica and from everybody else on this esteemed cohort.
From Canada, Michael Soberman.
I'm assuming that I was just checking to make sure there was no other Canadians. So I'm Michael Soberman. I work with the I Center for Israel Education. I'm most impressed that Ira has decided to wear a bow tie today. I saw him yesterday on Zoom and he was much more casually dressed. So you win the award, my friend. I feel like I'm in a Mitch Albom book where, you know, some force of nature walks me through my own life and I get to sort of see my life through sort of the eyes of today because all of you people, or so many of you people, are in it. And, you know, I remember going back in time and interacting educationally with many of you at some point. So hopefully the book will end as well as it started.
Max Pivo from New Jersey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Max Pivo. I'm currently in New Jersey, waiting for the day when I can get back to my college campus, but doing the best with what we have now. Right now, I'm an iCenter intern consultant, very vague job title, but having a lot of fun doing it. I've done a lot of fun work with Michael, Shalom, and Barry, and so many other people on the iCenter team. Like everyone else has said, I'm excited to take part and be a part of this experience.
Shalom from Israel.
Yes, I'm both excited and worried about this gathering. I'm honored to be part of it, but it's like your life is being presented in front of you, and that has sometimes worrying connotations, although I'll stick to birthdays, as opposed to the other. This is a wonderful, wonderful occasion. Again, thank you for having me, and really, I'm greatly honored to be surrounded by esteemed colleagues that have become friends.
Thank you. David Goldberg may be new to some of you, but I met him in the 1970s in Waltham, Massachusetts.
For David Goldberg from Lockdown, London. What Shalom Orzak forgot to say to you is that he and I were not only in the same school, but we were in the same class. So the privilege of knowing Shalom most of my life, and a privilege of knowing a few of you on the call. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to this evening's deliberations.
From the Northwoods of Wisconsin, right? I think Eliezer's muted. We'll go to Jeff Shine from the Northwoods of Minnesota. We'll come back to you, Eliezer. Jeff's muted. Eliezer, you're up.
Yeah, so I'm the former Dean of Jewish Studies at the American Hebrew Academy. Happy to be on the call and see everyone. I know a few of you from the past.
Jeff is muted, Menachem is muted. We welcome you. And is that everybody? That's on my screen. Menachem, is that everybody?
You forgot the second most important, Menachem.
Barry, I was just unmuted. So hi, everyone. I'm glad to be with folks. I'm Jeffrey Shine from the greater Northwest, Midwest, from Minneapolis, and I'm the Senior Consultant for Jewish Education of the Mordechai M. Kaplan Center for Jewish Peoplehood, and it's a pleasure to be with folks. Looking forward to it.
Good to have you again. And another Menachem from the holy city of New York with a lot of snow, I believe.
A lot of snow. I was just going to say what a delight it is to be with another Menachem. I'm so happy. I've never with another Menachem. Nice to meet you too. Happy birthday. Just sharing the Pismon Brotherhood with Avidan, the Plainview Brotherhood with Ira, the mentorship that Erica gave me and Shalom gave me. This is like Jewish geography. Anyway, I'm here in New York. I serve as scholar in residence at UJ Federation of New York, and I work with the I Center with great delight with Michael and with Barry, and it is lovely, lovely to see all of you.
Menachem, that's everybody, correct?
Yeah, it's everybody. Susan Handelman is having computer trouble, so the intention, as Barry said, is to do this again, and right now it's part of a larger conference, which we're trying to kind of use the momentum from that conference also for this, but in the future we'll do it. Won't have to do with any conferences, and hopefully she'll be able to join us, but I'm hoping that she'll figure out how to get on her phone or something, but we'll see what happens.
Morati, Erica, take it away. Teach us.
All right. I want to wish Menachem a special happy birthday because I know that birthdays are important to Lubavitcher Rebbe. So I think they're important acknowledgement of the day you're born. Important value and worth came to the planet. So what I was very struck in reading the guidelines, the educational guidelines by Rav Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. I felt somewhat embarrassed that I was not familiar with this text. And when I started reading it, I didn't do anything. I couldn't, I just read it straight and then went back to the points that particularly made a roshem, an impression on me. And I think they made an impression for a reason. I want to share my screen with you to talk a little bit about intimidation and humiliation of students. And early on, the exquisite sensitivity that he brings to the life of each student in acknowledging the power that the power imbalance that teachers have over students. And I became aware of this early on in my own education, certainly in one's academic training. Humiliation is a feeling that both is lives and resides within me, but also depending on your professor or your various mentors, may be put on you from the outside. I do recall when I spent a year in seminary in Israel, a teacher had lost his temper. He was in an absolute rage. And the next day he came in, and instead of apologizing, he used the Rambam, used Maimonides in his defense to talk about how anger, when it's correctly used, can motivate students. Well, all these years later, I don't remember much of his Torah, but I do remember the rage that he was in. I went on to marry an Englishman who spent a long time explaining corporal education that he suffered. People come into the classroom with various cricket bats and slippers and other instruments of torture. Mr. Hackett proudly walked in with his cricket bat and said, "I'm Mr. Hackett, and I will whack it." So you can, take that where you'd like it to go. But that was a very, I think that sense that you were always afraid in the classroom was an experience that many of us did not have growing up in an American system, but in other systems, kids who were actually hit by just in the gallery view. Can you raise your hand if you suffered corporal punishment as a student? Okay, so only a few, but still a few, and thinking about the maybe the long-term impact that had. On another note, my husband went on to become a physician, and part of his training was being what's called pimped in academic medical literature. And there is not a vast body of literature, but there are academic articles on the experience of pimping students. My daughter, who went on in his path as a medical resident, has experienced this also. The embarrassment or humiliation of students in front of their peers and in front of other professionals. So the long tail of this is still experienced even in upper echelons of learning and in graduate school. And it's something that I think I want to share with you, because I think the treatment of it in Rav Schneerson's writing is particularly, I think raises all kinds of issues. Part of which is how sensitive, or are we sensitive, sufficiently sensitive, or sometimes are we coddling our students? So that's where I think we can begin an interesting and important conversation. So here we go. Here you can, just in case any of you needed the visual because you didn't understand what I was talking about, here you go, nice cartoon of the teacher. And I imagine that that's a visual that students for many centuries had in various ways. And certainly some teachers have defended their behavior through statements like this from Devarim or from Mishlei, that God disciplines you just as a man disciplines his son. Yiser ish et beno, Hashem elokecha miasrecha. Or in Proverbs, right? Musar Hashem b'ni, right? Don't turn away, al timas, don't neglect or turn away or reject. That God loves rebuke, and that if you love your child, you will rebuke your child. Happy is the person, it says in Psalms, who you discipline. Umutaratecha tilamdenu. So you're learning, you're enhancing that person's learning through the experience of discipline. The Gemara in Brachot also talks about it. I'll do it in English for those of you not following in Hebrew. Rava, and some say Rav Chizda, says if a person sees that suffering has befallen him, he examines his actions. If he examines his actions and he can't find anything lacking, then it may be because of his dereliction in Torah study, and emphasizing the gravity of the issue with this biblical proof text from Tehillim, from Psalms. Happy is the man whom you punish, God, and teach out of your law. So if a person suffers, then his or her learning will be in some way enhanced. Wanted to share from something I just recently saw in an online publication on the history of humiliation that points to the future of human dignity. And I will put that quote here at the center. And humiliation as a social practice performed by those who seek to strengthen and affirm their power over others has not disappeared. It continues to be highly attractive to children, adolescents, and adults who feel empowered by pushing others into the gutter. By involving a wide audience, social media helps the penetrators who seek to humiliate others. Indeed, they thoroughly depend on that audience to like their behavior and approve of it. Similar to shaming, humiliation needs spectators to accomplish its purpose. Beyond destroying the victim's sense of self, humiliation is about exposing his or her subjugation to a social world that looks on and cheers the aggressor. And to just highlight this point, many years ago, I was teaching in a retreat in the Midwest, at a leadership retreat, some highly successful, at least on the financial level, highly successful Jewish leaders in the North American Jewish community, and one of them shared that when he was in business school, and this was a person who was obviously had obviously found his feet, but when he was in business school, his professor in front of all the students told him that he would amount to nothing. And as he shared this story with the class, he began to weep openly. So that was behavior of someone who I assumed was in his late 30s or 40s. And what I wanted to point out is I think what Rav Schneerson was trying to create long before his time, perhaps or long before its time, was a more humane classroom. So I just wanted to read for our edification, and then we can discuss. An educator or counselor must realize that not only is it essential for him to use appropriate phrases in his lessons, spell check, didn't catch that, but that their manner of expression, whether he expresses them politely and patiently or irritably and derisively, also affects the foundation of education and guidance. Even general displays of agitation and ridicule by an educator or counselor, for example, when an educator uses unrefined terms in referring to one of the worst of all human failings, terms that are indeed accurate, but that are nonetheless crude. In other words, you can be saying something that may be an honest assessment of a student's capability, but nevertheless, that makes a bad impression on a pupil. Hearing such words of scorn, although true, from the mouth of his educator, diminishes the educator's stature in the pupil's eyes. So this I found interesting. It wasn't only about the diminishment of the student, but the teacher unwittingly diminishes his or her own impact by using that kind of methodology in trying to reinforce a message. Many educators and counselors err here. They think that seething with thunderous noise and clamor helps them achieve their goal in education or guidance. Among them are those who pummel their students with extremely harsh and angry language, insulting and berating them. Truly, even if the pupil, I'm so sorry, becomes upset temporarily from the flaming rhetoric of the educator and counselor, his heart shrinking within him in pain, and at times his eyes shedding bitter tears, this type of education yields no benefit whatsoever. Any temporary positive effects vanish like a fleeting dream. If you think that a student is going to remember the harshness and the rhetoric, what they will remember instead are the negative associations they have with that particular teacher. And I just wanted to conclude with an expression that we find in the book of Samuel in the 3rd chapter of Sefer Shmuel. There it describes young Samuel's success as a prophet. And it says in the Hebrew, V'lo hipil b'kol devarav arza, that none of his words were allowed to fall to the ground. There's a lot of ways to interpret that. God allowed the prophet to be successful by making sure that the things that he articulated came true. Perhaps it means that the community allowed him to be successful by holding up his words. Perhaps it also meant in some way that this expression of words falling to the ground, of not allowing words to fall to the ground, is that to be a successful leader, nay educator, is to hear what people say and to pay such careful attention that we hold up those words. And that's the kind of attentiveness to the student disposition and character that I found in Rav Schneerson's work. And I think it begs a conversation about the ways in which we continue to humiliate students. And on the other hand, that we engage sometimes in the opposite behavior, where we're afraid of students, we're afraid of student comments, we're afraid of student ratings. So we don't actually tell students honestly how they are doing or what they need to do. So that bounce, either to one extreme or another, I think does not help in the growth of our students. So that's Those are my thoughts. I can't hear you, Barry. I think you're muted.
Yes, I said beautiful, simply beautiful. And that's what teaching and learning is about. A few minutes of teaching and learning, and it helps us fly. So let us fly now to Israel, to another fabulous teacher who brings a Zohar to us. Zohar, Bakasha.
Toda, Barry. Thank you very much, Erica. This was enlightening. Much like you, I must confess, I was not familiar, definitely not in depth, with the principles of the Lubavitcher regarding education. And after having read a couple of his books last month, because of this program, I must say, I must thank this program. I was quite amazed to see the depth of both insight and foresight of this person. And I would like to start us off, and again, do it in less than 15 minutes. To do the Lubavitcher in less than 15 minutes is like entering the eye of a perfect storm, only with a snorkel. But we'll try to do it nonetheless. And I would like actually to use Erica's wonderful opening here as a segue, because Erica looked at humiliation, and the reason which the Lubavitcher thought, as she puts it so eloquently, to create more of a humane landscape and environment for education. Here I would like to make a distinction which is as important to the Lubavitcher, and I'll show how, and that is the very important distinction between humiliation, which is a no-no, and humility, which is a yes. In other words, the ability to form an educational process which is not only gratifying but also humbling to the student is definitely an objective. So humiliation is wrong, humility is profoundly desirable. And indeed, before we go into the second and third, I just want to put by way of context, we need to understand always, not only the content, but the context. Remember the conceptual and mental world within which the Lubavitcher operates. That is a world that is not only deeply steeped in rabbinic literature, but also profoundly influenced by pre-modern mystical doctrines, which allows for a hypersensitivity to Lashon HaKodesh, and I'll show it, and a great adherence to some of the precepts. The Lubavitcher, a giant in his own right, was standing on the shoulders of earlier giants as he tried to explicate some of these precepts of his. So if we talked, one is the distinction between humiliation and humility. The second is, and Erica touched upon that as well, is our ability to ensure that our participants have, on the one hand, a safe space to study, and at the same time, a brave space to be challenged. In other words, our modern, or as Barry will probably put it, postmodern tendency to really focus on safe spaces is sometimes our most profound shortcoming, as we avoid our mandate to create brave spaces for students where they can be ipso facto challenged and where their thought processes may be pushed beyond their sometimes often way too myopic zone of comfort. That's point number two. Point number three is that the sole mandate of education is to teach people how to think and not what to think. That's the fine line between education and demagogy. That's the fine line between education and manipulation. That's the fine line between humility and Erica's humiliation. When you try to overpower your own thought process and do so by undermining your students' inherent and independent right to an independent thought process, you're exercising humiliation. When you're stretching the students' ability to think for themselves, but do so in a context of Reshit Chokhmah, Kne Chokhmah, by all means, you want to be a heretic? No problem. It's like I love to say to atheists, the God you don't believe in is probably the God I don't believe in either. But let's now start talking about God. So the notion of allowing people a process where they learn how to think without infringing on what they think may again ipso facto allow people to go through a process which I very much found also in the Lubavitcher, to my great delight, where people, and Barry has heard me, and Michael, and some of you may have heard me speak about this at length, where people, and that is especially true in today's day and age, where people are starting to revisit some of their exclamation points and remassage them into question marks again. In other words, they start revisiting some of their preconceived assumptions and learning how to think about them with context, with complexity, with nuance, and above everything else, humility. This was a preface which takes half of my time. Now to the Lubavitcher himself, a number of things that I would like to discuss from the part that I took, chapters 15 to 18 in his work. And basically the Lubavitcher here again uses a very, very mystical, Hasidic mystical language when he talks about what is known in Hasidic literature in general. Mystical Hasidic literature is Torat Achdut HaAfachim, the profound unification of seeming opposites. And what the Lubavitcher basically says, he touches upon an element, a sociological, psychological element that has profound educational ramifications. And I will dub it in such a manner and then show you his exact words. Every generation is a radical vis-a-vis its parents and a conservative vis-a-vis its children. Every generation wants to innovate vis-a-vis its parents and wants to remain traditional vis-a-vis its children. The Lubavitcher finds in this an inherent tension in what he calls Shnei Hafachim, two opposite forces who work hand by hand and are infused into our work as educators. On the one hand, and this is the way he says it, החינוך שאדם נותן לילדיו, education that a person gives his or her children, מבוסס מעיקרו, he says, is basically founded on שני הפכים, two opposites. Number one, conservatism, tradition, שמרנות. He says it without being shy, of course. עקרונות מהם אין לזוז. עקרונות מהם אין לזוז. In the book of Deuteronomy, לא תזוז מימין ושמאל, אין לזוז. This is what it says, ככתבה וכלשונה, שזאת התורה, in his language, שזאת התורה לא תהא מוחלפת, יסודות שלא ישתנו מחמת המקום והזמן. This is a skeleton that is cast in iron. And for the Lubavitcher, it's a necessary requisite for any solid educational process. There must be something in the values, the concepts, the ideas that we transmit from one generation to the other, which obviously from this standpoint is based on divine revelation, that inherently transcends space, time, fashion, trends. What you like, what you don't like is supremely irrelevant. That is the truth. And that's the way it should be. That element, the Lubavitcher will refer to it later in a fascinating juxtaposition of the Hebrew language into what the Mishnah renders a bor sud she'eino me'abed tipa, a water system that does not lose any drop of water. That is the accumulated wisdom of the Jewish generations, and it is put forth to the student based on divine revelation. Moshe kibel Torah miSinai, העבירה לזה, העבירה לזה, העבירה לזה, העבירה לזה. There is a lineage, there is a structure, and in that structure, there is a conceptual value-based skeleton, which is a tradition, Kabbalah leMoshe miSinai, with a capital K. On the other hand, at the same time, hand in hand, he starts in chapter 17. Mudgash, he says, it is reiterated, שלא לעמוד במקום אחד, אלא שחייבים לשגשג ולגדול. And goes even further to say, on the other hand, יסוד החינוך, the foundation of education is, I quote, השינוי מיום ליום. Elvin Schiff once put it in 1992. He said, constant change is at the very heart of the educational process. Now, these two afachim, these two opposites, live side by side in the heart of the human, and the educator needs to understand, according to the Lubavitcher, that not any single one of them can ever overcome the other. They must be, as part of our educational mandate, they must be perpetually negotiated. If there is the force of the bor sud she'eino me'abed tipa, the one who is the epitome of traditional wisdom, the one who understands the gravity of the accumulated wisdom of generations of Jews before him or her, there is, on the other hand, the Ma'ayan HaMitgaber, the ever-flowing fountain, whose raison d'etre is chidush, is innovation. Now, the Lubavitcher doesn't just say chidush versus tradition because that's the zeitgeist and because you have to say it. The Lubavitcher understands that chidush is also at the very heart of allowing every generation a sense of ownership over the evolution of Jewish life. Because if you're only a passive audience who is given a tradition, rather than an active participant who puts his or her thumbprint on the tradition for the next generation, matama. How do I render? And that's the question that I pose before us today, that the Lubavitcher poses, and I want to reiterate. How do we, that's the question he asks, how do we negotiate
the undisputed importance of tradition and conservatism, shamranut, without any apologetics, on the one hand, while not neglecting, undermining the importance of rendering the Torah relevant to each generation anew by offering the infrastructure for chidush. I'll end up by saying this. The Lubavitcher, coming from a long tradition of mystical literature and mystical understandings of the Torah, also exercises the sort of acute philological sensitivity, and it is not by coincidence that he uses those Mishneh dictums with the Bor Sut she'eno me'abed tipa versus Kamayan HaMitgaber. There is something quite compelling, which some of you may have not noticed in the Hebrew language. And if you think about it, in a Torah that was written in a landscape that was a desert, the rarest and most commanding value is water. And that's why it is not a coincidence that in the Torah, and later on in the Nach as well, we find an immediate root-based, etymologically based association between elements of water and elements of wisdom, of education, of knowledge. And I'll give you a few examples. The word levaer, to explicate something, comes from the word be'er, a water well. Be'ever harei Moav, ho'el Moshe ba'er et haTorah. Be'er levaer. Ma'ayan, ka'ma'ayan HaMitgaber, ma'ayan, a fountain, a water fountain, le'ayen, from the word ayin, le'ayen, to gaze, to scrutinize, to investigate. Parashat Mayim, watershed, and Parasha B'Torah, where one term moves to the other. Peleg, water cistern or water crook, and Bar Plugta, a person who is in dispute with you. Geut, watershed, and Gaon. Gaon means a genius in the modern term. In the days of Bachya and Saadia Gaon, the term Gaon, which was a head of a yeshiva, the term Gaon is someone whose wisdom is overflowing, from the word Geut. So when the Lubavitcher uses the terms Bor Sut she'eno me'abed tipa and Kamayan HaMitgaber, he speaks a language that already invites the erudite reader to look into the Torah as an invitation in of itself to understand what are some of the most beautiful precepts of chinuch. Okay, I'll take my snorkel off and back to Barry.
And now I understand this, fable about the Gettysburg Address. After two fabulous study sequences, sometimes one is speechless, but now we want to talk. So let's open up for discussion. I have a million questions, but let's start with you. Just put a hand up and you'll speak. Ira, was that a hand of yours going up?
Not yet. That's more of a looking over some of my notes and contemplation.
Okay. Any hands before I raise my hand? Any hands? Yeah, Menachem.
All right, so first of all, I wanted to read Susan Handelman. We have a bunch of people today, thank God, since everything is divine providence. A bunch of Zoom decided to have a horrendous malfunction today, so there are 5 members of this deliberation that can't get in, but they're going to be corresponding to us. First of all, guys, you can send me your comments and the emails that I just sent you, and I'm happy to read them, or Barry will read them. But so this is the first one. This is from, I might have stuff to say myself, but from Susan Handelman. So the following thing, she sent me a story that she wanted to share, a very short story. A seasoned rabbi and motivational speaker once shared his self-doubts with the Rebbe. He says, Rebbe, I'm considered a gifted speaker and I must have given thousands of talks, but I wonder how many of my talks hit home. I don't see any practical changes in the lives of my listeners. The Rebbe said, words from the heart, enter the heart. If you speak sincerely with passion, you'll be assured that your words will enter people's hearts, whether you see it or not. But then she wanted to emphasize the following part. If, however, you want to be able to observe the actual change in your audiences, I suggest that you speak not in abstract terms. Teach your audience with a practical Jewish tradition and leave them with an action point. And even if it's only one thing, and even if it seems minimal, that's how you inspire change. She said, a community activist from Berlin visited the Rebbe for Simchas Torah. The Rebbe was dancing with the Torah. As the Rebbe was dancing with the Torah, the Rebbe turned to him and said, see to it that in Berlin becomes a place filled with Hasidic warmth. Amen, the man said enthusiastically. The Rebbe continued to circle the Bina. To the man's astonishment, the Rebbe passed him again and he smiled. He said, Nu, have you done anything to implement our recent discussion? That was from Susan Handelman.
Menachem Creditor.
I'm only going to begin to process what you each just shared so beautifully. The emotionality of the student is really where I feel most activated. Like the Ma'ayana Mitgaber, on the one hand, you could say is thoughtfully dedicated to Chidush, but on the other hand, can't hold it back, literally can't contain. And that sometimes, no matter what the age, I think I just froze. No matter what the age of the student, can be the invitation precisely to the kind of over-disciplinarian teaching. Like, it's so frustrating to me as the teacher that I can't make you see things the way I do, or can't see the emotional impact of what I'm saying. I'm hearing both parts of the conversation as, first of all, unfortunately, very relatable for me. I've had moments like this as a student and frustrated moments as a teacher. So I'm just caught in the emotionality of the learning, what it is to be sensitive to the emotional place of participants and students.
I have to follow up that question because it's so important, and it hit me from both presentations, beginning strongly with Erica. I want to ask all of you, do you think that there is a strain or a strong strain of humiliating students in contemporary Jewish education, in Sunday schools and afternoon schools and day schools? Are we actually creating classrooms of humiliating kids? Max? Any sense of it, Max, in your life?
I would say in my experience that it has not been the case. I feel very lucky, at least with the schools that I've been blessed to go to. I had an all-Jewish private education growing up through high school. I've always felt very blessed to have the teachers that I've had inside and outside the classroom.
Michael?
I think that I would say the converse has actually happened. The pendulum has swung so far to the other side that, you know, no longer can you even be remotely stern or firm or honest with feedback with a student for fear of them not being able to handle it and bringing the parents in. And of course, it brings my mind to that famous cartoon that I've seen, I'm sure many of you have seen, where, you know, it's a picture of a kid with a report card with an F. And it shows in the 1970s, they come home with this and the parents are yelling at the kid. And in 2020, they come home with an F and the parents are yelling at the teacher, right? It's the teacher's fault. So I think we've completely, what we've done is we have done, I would argue, a great disservice to our children in the way we parent and educate, because we've communicated to them that the moment you are feeling uncomfortable, the moment you are feeling offended, that is when you need to sound the alarm and someone will come and stop that from happening or remove you from the situation. So what happens is we have an entire generation who don't know how to deal with being offended or in a position that's uncomfortable. And, you know, bullying, I'm not advocating for bullying by any stretch, but as a kid, when you're bullied, you then learn how to respond to a bully. And later in life, when you get bullied, perhaps not in the same way, you've equipped the skills and at least know to name it and to respond to it. And what we're doing today is we're sort of removing that skill set from our kids. And this notion of, helicopter parents or snowplow parents has become such a phenomena that this generation of people are not able to handle even the smallest form of adversity.
Ira? Yeah, Ira. And then Jeff Shine. Ira and then Jeff.
To build off of what Michael is saying, and I see that a lot, and I've experienced that as a teacher, where I've had students or parents come to me and say, my child got a C or a C plus in your class for the first semester. Is there an assignment that they can do to get an A? When that's not actually the point of, it's not one magical antidote that they can take to absolve them of whatever it was that got them to that grade. And I think there's also something about what you're saying, Michael, in terms of not necessarily of like, what is that skill set and what is a way, and this I think is very much directed to what Doctors Raviv and Brown are saying, in that in order to create a space that enables and allows for students to think and come to conclusions on their own, they need to have, and I would actually almost call it more of a trusting space, because the trust allows for discomfort to take place and allows for that braveness that you were talking about, Dr. Raviv. But that cannot happen if students are not feeling emotionally grounded, if they've been humiliated, if they don't have that emotional safety net or that sense of trust with the educator, they're not going to be willing to engage in the content, in the skills. And it makes me think of something that I learned at the very beginning in graduate school. Students at the end of the day might not remember what you taught them, but they will remember how they felt. They will remember how you made them feel. And that's something that I think is knowing that we can make them feel a little uncomfortable, but knowing that they have that support network underneath them, that we as educators, or we as the educational enterprise, are going to be there to sort of catch them when they fall and help them get back up. We're not going to pull them back up, but we're going to help them learn how to get up when they fall. And that's the skill set that I think we need to, I think there's both a reckoning that we need to do a better job of it. And I think we're also coming to terms with, well, we're starting to do a better job of it.
Jeff.
So thank you, Ira and Michael, for your comments. That psychological frame put me in touch with Vygotsky, Lev Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, that when we're dealing with real people, they can stretch them too far, too hard, too fast, they will break. And I think there's a truism there. My next two comments are fairly quick, and it's a little scary because I find myself in my old age becoming something of a classicist, and that's certainly not how I began Jewish education. I want to refer to and mention Israel Scheffler's book, Tales of My Youth. And he talks about his encounters as a teenager at JTS with Mordecai Kaplan. And he said he was not a particularly supportive, warm teacher, but what I took from him lasted me a lifetime, which is to challenge ideas and always be moving forward and questioning what I really believe at any given time. It's very useful, I think. And I really love the formulation of finding challenge and yet support and comfort. And it reminded me of Lawrence Deleuze's wonderful book, Mentor, where he draws that, I don't know if you remember, the quadrant. It's such a wonderful quadrant. You can have low support and low challenge, right? And that'll put your mentee to sleep. You can have high support and low challenge, and that won't help them grow. What you want, of course, is high support and high challenge. So we're always looking for that. And one last quick thing, my reading for this week, Trick Mirror, Gia Tolentino, and it's the story of shaming on culture and cancel culture and the reaction to that of we can't say anything that might be controversial because we'll be thought of as one of the people we're trying to cancel out the human essence of the people we're talking to. So thank you, everyone, for a rich discussion.
So I want to push this a little. So far, all the speakers have been articulate souls, and it seems to me there's a certain focus on, as Max started it, on day schools. I want to talk about the major form of American Jewish education for almost a century now, the supplementary school. And I want to refer to David Chom's research. David Chom, many years ago, did a research on the supplementary school, and it's a frightening book that really got buried. At one point, a teacher says, the classroom is a zoo and I'm a zookeeper. And kids say to the parents, why do I have to go to Hebrew school? And the father said, well, I had to suffer through it and you're going to have to suffer through it. And people talk it about, and kids talk about it as second only going to the dentist. So I want to talk about the majority form of Jewish education. Let's not forget, approximately 80% of American kids that are in contact with formal Jewish learning between the age of 8 to 13 are these places that Shalom called the zoo. In other words, I understand Max's growing up because also we had the privilege to be part of that. And I know the other schools. Faculty do not know their kids. They know nothing about their kids. The whole culture and the atmosphere is to get it over with and to be babysitters. The hiring of teachers. Look at who we hire to be in this most sensitive of places in the world with kids. Look at the people. They're lovely people, but we know nothing about their ability to be humble or human relations. They don't have to bring any certificate or proof of any kind of ability to be humble or to be loving. So I'm asking now a larger systemic question. Is the major form of education that we're engaged with what both Erica and Zohar talked about, or is it really ultimately a humiliating phenomenon that the Jewish people has created? Erica.
I don't think it's humiliating. I think it's irrelevant. And irrelevant may actually be on some level worse than humiliating. I assume that if a student is humiliated, they're also engaged. And maybe the long-term consequences of that will, of course, be worse than ignorance. I've been thinking, Zohar, a lot about what you said. And in order to produce newness that lives in relation with the tradition, with the Mesorah or the Kabbalah, whatever it is that you've accepted, you have to have a lot of tochen, right? There has to be a lot of groundwork. And once you have that, it's fun to play with newness. You know, skiing is not fun unless you know how to ski, right? And in fact, I remember the Tiger, what was it called? The Battle Hymn of the Tiger Republic. Amy Chu's very controversial book on parenting. One of the things she said in this Chinese type of parenting that she described was, and I think it's a problem in the Hebrew school system, in the congregational school system, is that you need to give certain skills to such an extent that people enjoy playing the violin. In other words, if you're only doing it for a year or two and it's enforced, you don't even get the skills to actually make the newness. And I don't think Hebrew school can communicate either of those values. But I also want to connect this, Barry, to earlier comments that Michael and Ira and others made. You know, there was Michael, you brought up a cartoon, so I see you and I raise you. There was a New Yorker cartoon where a kid comes home with a trophy that's bigger than himself and says, "Look, Dad, I lost." And in that kind of culture where I was brought up, I don't think that schools are humiliating. I think we're not in some way humiliating enough. I agree with Michael. I think it's very hard to teach students today who get offended, who need, you know, to Jonathan Haidt's point, the coddling of the American mind. It's very, very hard to teach right now in this climate. So this conversation is particularly relevant and something I think about every day. I wonder how we are supposed to teach where we cannot adjudicate knowledge with students because they can't handle it. That so much of the teaching process is worrying about the mental health of students. I actually was working on an article before COVID called The Pedagogy of the Under-Oppressed. Now I think our students are a little bit more oppressed than they were because of COVID, so it's inappropriate. But I think that the learning has to happen with some degree of investment, and I don't know how to find the balance. I'm struggling.
So let me ask the question a little differently. I will accept what you're all saying about humiliating. I'm asking again about the practical world. Is there something related to the sensitivity, the concern with the child, the belief in the child, that we're missing in this large supplementary system? In other words, look, I can't make peace with the fact that the largest system of Jewish education is the weakest. I can't make peace with it because this is where the bulk of our Jews are. So is there something that we're not doing right? Maybe it's not humiliation, maybe I don't know what. Or do we just have to say that this is it? In other words, look, this was a construct of the 20th century, quite a smart one, I think. Is this what we have to live with? Or maybe do we have to go out of the walls and do something different? Or do we have to learn here from even the experience of Chabad? Or am I overdoing this whole point?
Hey.
Yep. Please go ahead.
All right. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay, good. I don't know. I can't tell what that's okay. First of all, I wanted to read Susan Handelman's comment that goes with the story, and then I wanted to just mention something. And also, there was a comment from one of the other panelists that said that he felt that supplementary teachers carry themselves differently, engage their students. Anyway, I wanted to.
Could you repeat that? I didn't understand that.
Jeffrey wrote this thing on the side. You could see it yourself. We could all look at it ourselves. It's all there. Anyway, but the thing that Susan Handelman, she said like this: what is the one thing we would like to take as an action point, and what at a certain point, what's the one thing that we could do to change the teaching or the educational activity? In other words, it's all nice to have theoretical discussions, according to her. What's the point of action? So I wanted to just say one thing to her and to all of us, and that is, first of all, this deliberation is itself a point of action because it's never happened before, and it brings together a group of people. I mean, we can't be satisfied with that, but at least that is a beginning. I mean, and just to say, and I'm not promoting Chabad when saying this, the Rebbe, just to relate back to Erica, the Rebbe said in this generation, love is it. You can't, that's the juice. That's the thing that flows. That's the only thing that's going to make any difference in our generation. And the Hebrew schools that Chabad has, and people, knock them for different reasons, are successful generally. I mean, for a lot of obvious reasons. One is that the teachers are highly motivated. They're also educated. They're also dedicated to their students, which is another thing which you're going to see in the Rebbe's in a lot of the Rebbe's work when he talks about this thing. Anyway, so I wanted to at least bring in Susan's comment and make that comment myself.
Barry, can I just come in for a second?
Please do. And after this, Jeff Shine, please come back. Your comments and follow-ups important. David,
okay,
please.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that the humiliation piece is probably is different now to what it was 30 years ago. Erica talked about Mr. Hackett, who I remember very well from Hasmonean. Those days are gone. Those days are gone. But the generation of people who experienced that are still with us, and now they are the parents, and some of them are the grandparents, and the damage is done in that generation. For me, the great challenge is undoing that damage with the parent generation, to enable the parents to come to terms with it, to enable the children to have a more enriching Jewish education. I think there has to be some kind of, we have to work through what has happened. There has to be an acknowledgement that that kind of behavior has existed in our parents' and grandparents' generation, and then find a way to repair that so that the parents can play that key role in developing the richness of the Jewish education.
So there's been really, I think, a terrific response, which makes me feel better about the question I was asking. Jeff Shine says it, and Jeff, talk through what you said. Jeff Shine said it, and Erica agrees. And David Breifman, you said he's sorry he can't join, but he agrees with Jeff. Jeff, give us what you're saying and what your read today is about the supplementary.
Sure. So it's always the search for the derech emsa'it, right? For the middle ground. And as I work largely through Gratz with groups of master students, and I have the privilege of having windows into their classrooms and their experiences, they are much more attuned to the emotional, social, and the constituting of community. They wouldn't think of not creating the learning community by recognizing the people are there, many of them. Now, whether they have the capacity to do that, and especially in a virtual environment, that's another issue. What actually, Barry, I'm so glad you brought up David Schoen's piece, because it's a rich, thick, it's a dissertation study. And the part that continues to speak to me isn't so much the classroom disengagement or lack of knowledge or zoo-like character. It's his characterization later of what happens when the plausibility structures, to use Goffman, aren't in place in Jewish education. So this same teacher who's having trouble controlling and directing the kids is also praising to the hilt the value of Shmirat Shabbat. It's what Jews do. And those same students then find the teacher at the mall on Shabbos afternoon. And so it creates a different kind of challenge about, it's really related to Susan's comment of how can you take concrete steps if your life isn't aligned with those values. So.
Zohar, so does this solve the dilemma you raised at the end? You raised the dilemma based on the writings of the Rebbe. Does this solve this dichotomy between the undisputed importance of tradition while not neglecting, the other side, the dignity of the person?
Quite honestly, far from it. I think that the points that you raised actually bring to the surface a much broader challenge that we have. And I'll refer to David's remarks about the richness of Jewish education once we go past that, for lack of better terms, traumatized generation. I'm not sure that's the main issue. It is definitely an issue. I think the main issue is that we are in a catch-22 situation. You cannot have a rich Jewish educational experience where the term Jewish itself is not perceived as harboring a Jewish or a rich meaning to begin with. And when there has been a constant reduction in the value, breadth, and depth of those who are mandated by the community to transmit that value to the next generation. And here, in the risk of being honest and not maybe popular, I want to say, Barry, that you were very gentle in your depiction of some of the educational representatives that work on our behalf in those schools. I don't know about their ability to love and cater, which is important, but I also, from my experience, know that, and again, without judging anybody on a personal level, the average level of the Jewish educator in those schools is eons away from what I would expect, eons, and I'm being gentle and polite, It's eons away from what I would expect from a basic level of knowledge, commitment, passion, and role modeling of Jewish life. I'm not even talking about that. Role modeling of Jewish life. You cannot transmit the value of Judaism to a next generation if those who transmit it to begin with are an epitome of its irrelevance. It simply won't work.
Before I call on Menachem, because Menachem has several responses, I want to ask you, in your other hat, as a person who's been central to Taglit over its years, do you have any sense of the people coming in and what their sense or attitude or approach to Jewishness is? In other words, do they see Taglit as a continuation, or is it like, oh my God, I didn't know this was what Judaism was really like? What's your experience?
Yeah, what you just said, Barry, and you know this. Don't be humble. You're the one who originated Birthright Israel. I'm your predecessor. I came in your footsteps.
Thank you.
And many of our participants say that they came to Israel and decided to come on Birthright despite their Jewish education, and not because of it. In other words, many of them find in their Birthright experience or other good experiences, they find them quite removed from their preconceived assumptions about what Judaism has in store for them. The ability to, what I call, expand the canvas of their Jewish appreciation beyond those very myopic and irrelevant, many times irrelevant lenses. Erica said, it's not about it's about the irrelevance of it. The ability to offer them an entryway into a Jewish experience in a manner that they find relevant before they find in it an action point. It allows them to reconceptualize what Judaism and Jewish life may be in their lives. And once we're able to insert Judaism as a relevant element in one's identity, then we can start working towards what Erica called the action items, the ability to push them forward. But many of those participants, Barry, they go back and they don't say necessarily, wow, Israel is fantastic, Judaism is great. Many of them say, I had no idea that Judaism is 1, 2, 3. I had no idea that Israel is 1, 2, 3. They had no idea.
David Breitman has joined us before, Menachem, before you. David, I hope you've been able to hear things. Do you have any diverse reactions? David plays a very central role in everything in this book.
Thanks, Barry. Yeah, I have been able to listen to most of the whole conversation. A couple of things. One, here's firstly, there's an emotional response and a cognitive response. And I know amongst academics, we're supposed to keep the emotions out of this, right? To have a discussion about the places where most of our children are getting their education amidst a pandemic, when the educators in the field have been nothing but heroic, courageous, resilient, pivoting, and to deride them in such a comprehensive way, I hope this recording doesn't go anywhere beyond all of us. When you're talking about humiliation, to humiliate an entire field for all of the things that we've just said, why would you enter into a field when the academics or the pseudo-academics around them are completely deriding them in so many substantive ways, which, by the way, and as the cognitive part, are so inaccurate from what's actually taking place in the field today. Because the field of congregation and education today, as just one example, and we can talk about summer camps, we can talk about Israel trips, we can talk about JCCs, is not what was described 30 years ago. Now, there's a proxy going on here. The issues of Jewish education that we're talking about is an actual proxy for where the Jewish community is at today. If you think the purpose of Jewish education and Jewish community is to perpetuate that which has come before it, by the way, a classic definition of education, then we're way off the mark. If you believe, and I'm glad Erica referenced Freire before, if you believe the purpose of education is to give people the knowledge and skills in order to be able to transform and make Jewish community relevant to the future in which you want to live, then I think we're having a different conversation here. I must admit, the other emotional part, which is difficult here, is that you're having a discussion here with so many men about a field which is so dominated by so many women is uncomfortable at best. Because now we're putting a whole other layer of, I think, and you cannot dismiss it, this conversation in any other context would smack almost of patriarchal misogyny. Now, the Rebbe's brilliance in so many ways was the ability to be able to take the tradition and realize it was not going to end up where he expected it to go. That's the magic of the shluchim. When the shaliach meets someone, whether it's on campus or in the street, the starting point is where they're at, recognizing that they're not going to end up exactly where they might think they were going to go. So I think this conversation now is very, very, it's complicated, yet we need to get some of the hubris out the way to really analyze where we're going and what we're talking about, because the future of the community is at stake here. Let's make no mistake about that. But this is not going to be the Jewish community that our grandparents and our parents wanted. Why are people humiliated? Because they're ashamed that they're not perpetuating what their previous generations had. Once they get over that, then this Judaism thing has a real, real way of succeeding moving forward. And I give us all permission to be able to dream together, because I think that's where the really exciting message of the Rebbe's message, as Zohar said, really comes into play, when we can imprint our own lives on the tradition that came before us.
Thank you, David. Menachem Schmidt. And then Michael, and then Eliezer, if I've left you out. So Menachem Schmidt.
Okay, I just wanted to say one thing from my own thing, which is that the Rebbe always was extremely positive all the time. There's a book, even if you haven't seen already, Positivity Bias, which is which is important. Also, there's just David, there are two women that can't get on this Zoom, so you're right, but it's a little bit more stacked than it wouldn't look this. It would look exactly like this. Hindalea Sharfstein wrote, I put it in the thing. We experience both humiliation and humility when we come face to face with a lack or a defect on our part. If I am the center of the world, I see the lack as a reflection on myself. That's devastating, and I experience humiliation. If God is the center of my world, I see the lack as something God has given me to help me fulfill my purpose. That's a moment of humility. Putting God at the center, this is part of a bigger conversation that needs to be translated into the atmosphere of the educational setting, a way to perhaps create the brave space that Zohar spoke about. Hindalea Sharfstein from Beis Chana. And the other thing was Ben Jacobs. I don't know if you want me to still continue. I'll just read this. This is from before. In response to Barry's question about humiliating students, I think another way to think of it is not as a matter of character assassination, but as a form of humiliating students based on the knowledge they typically lack. I think reticence to participate in Jewish education or serious Jewish learning comes from a serious deficiency in Jewish background, often reinforced by mismatched teachers and curricula, and therefore makes Jewish learning inaccessible.
Thank you. Michael, Shalom, and Eliezer. Michael, Eliezer, and Shalom.
I see a convergence here of something that Zohar mentioned and the question, Barry, that you posed. And I don't want to get into commenting about quality of supplemental schools and the teachers, because I do not feel qualified by any stretch to comment on that. And I'm sure there are some that are excellent and some that are less excellent. But to me, the issue is much bigger. It's the stakes that are involved and the role or significance that experience has according to the parents, who until a certain age are still moving the children along and helping them to prioritize. So the challenge becomes that if you asked virtually any parent when their child had 1 hour to do their homework, if they should do their secular homework, their math, their science, and their physics, or their supplemental school homework, I think we know which direction they would be steered, because parents want their children to succeed in school, because that provides a gateway to the rest of their life, and doing well in school opens opportunities for you. I don't know that we've created the same argument with Jewish education unless it's linked in the form of a day school to sort of that same trajectory. So the first challenge is, how do we find the value that Zohar spoke about, that Zohar spoke about, and say to people that this is a valuable experience that will help me move forward in a facet of life in a way that is equal to all of the other activities, be them sports or music or secular studies, that are competing for my time. And Zohar then spoke about, and Zohar, I've never heard you say this before, which is remarkable, and I'm definitely going to steal this from you and claim it as my own. But when you said every generation is a radical to the parents and conservative to their children, I think it's 100% bang on. And I think what's happening here is we're doing really well right now at being conservative to our children. And our children are not being allowed to be radical towards us. And some of you may have heard me say this before. So at the risk of repeating myself, I'll say it again. We have, I would argue, built our community on the mantra of one of my favorite films, which is Field of Dreams, where the catchphrase from that one is, if you build it, he will come, or if you build it, they will come. And we build schools and institutions and programs. And guess what? In synagogues, they're not coming in the way that we envisioned. Because I think, according to Zohar, the converse is true. It's not if we build it, they will come. It's if they come, they will build it. And we need to give people the license to author the type of Jewish experiences they want, and recognize that while those experiences may look radically different from what we grew up with, whether we liked it or not, is okay. And the moment we try to insert ourselves and try to convince them that they're not building it the right way, that's when they'll just throw their hands up and walk away from it. So the ability to create and to own and to build something for yourself, in my opinion, is the most valuable tool and opportunity you can give a person. And that is where we should be focusing our attention if we want to succeed at this turning point in how we're doing Jewish education.
I think last two comments before we have to begin to sum up. Max Pivo says something important. Max, are you still with us? Could you say it, what you wrote?
I'm here, Barry.
Say
I
it.
was just talking about, I wrote a note in the chat section, just thinking about the stark contrast between the character of the student in the classroom today and the character of the student in the world. That I've been absolutely inspired by the passion displayed by friends of mine, other students who I've studied with, and in different phases of my life, and the way that they've reacted to the challenges of this past year. And what it's shown to me is that there is the existing underlying potential for bravery. It's a matter of whether or not the environment allows for the proper motivation and the tools and the resources for it to come to the surface. So the difference between how the generation today comports itself and acts in the classroom versus outside of it seems to me to point to the fact that the problem, at least some of the problem, as everyone has agreed, lies with the infrastructure and the resources provided by the educational system, and not just with a lack of bravery or passion amongst the generation.
Max, your words have always been important to me, but they're just so eloquent. Eliezer, and then we'll ask Menachem to sadly have to sum it up. Eliezer, you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, apologies for the delay. Go ahead.
Right, that's okay, fine. So I would agree that I think Shom is dated, and that there's a lot of exciting things going on in the realm of supplementary education. I've been listening to the JEP podcasts on, and there really is a lot of exciting activity in that sphere. I think if we look at what's going on now with public education, a lot of community, a lot of places, because of the pandemic where we had community, those opportunities are kind of gone. And it's really our Jewish world that's providing with some type of social connection in the world of the pandemic. I would just focus back in on the idea of relevance and ownership. I think those are really important comments. And you know, when you have ownership and you have the ability to create, you need skills to create, but you also just need room to create. You need space to create. And, we don't wait for children to, I don't know, have 10 years of art school before they start drawing, before they start painting. They paint right away, and it's an enjoyable activity. And I would say that's really what it comes down to in Jewish life is this something that is connected to me? Is it relevant in my self-definition and expression? Or is it something that's outside of it? And if it is internal, if it is relevant, and I have ownership, then I can start to create with whatever skills I have. And I think that's the important thing is having this be a relevant activity and creating opportunities for creation.
A wonderful pulling together of pieces. Menachem?
Okay, first of all, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming. And Barry, if you could give us any charge in terms of the intellectual stimulation we shared. Just look, I just wanted to say the following. Like I said, we wanted to take out to kind of connect this to the larger social vision conference that we're having at this point. And there's been some very interesting, a lot of different interesting sessions, et cetera. But because of that, we weren't able to we kind of fell victim to all the Zoom problems here. So just wanted to say that certain people couldn't get on because of some of the other people that got on before them and are not panelists. Also, we couldn't do dividing up. We couldn't do Zoom rooms where we could do smaller discussions and then come back and summarize and do some of those things, which I would really like to do for the future, And so, those technical problems are technical problems. But I think the very exciting thing about this session is that kind of we can see the possibilities. I mean, everyone on here has, and the people that are on my screen all have incredible, something incredible to not only give, but I think in our concept, and Barry, and as in the discussions I had with Barry, it's not only giving, it's a matter of also kind of, there's a concept in Chassidut about Yetzias Mitzrayim, going out of Egypt, going out of your limitations. And each one of us, by kind of sharing some of these thoughts and speaking, to each other in the different kind of collision of, each person is their own world. I think that we can really grow and we can really have some influence in areas that are very important. And so I really wanted to thank you all for coming and just say, like I said, that we'll do this again without, without these kind of some of the hindrances we had today for sure, but it was very important and it was great. And Eric and Zohar, it was magnificent. We really appreciate it so much.
Back to Barry. 2 or 3 sentences of sum ups. There's a lot of things in life that overwhelm me, and that's why I like this thing called life a lot. Like the state of Israel, for me, will forever be an overwhelming moment. The Dodgers won the World Series finally last year. These kind of discussions with an incredible bunch of people, buddies and people I don't know so well, whatever, it just stimulates me. It stimulates me because we're willing to deal with tough issues. And it's something I must say that attracted me in my meetings with Menachem and Shlomo Gostetner and other people in the world of Chassidut, which is an optimistic worldview that, yes, we can change it. The architects of the 20th century did what they did, and we can change it. So we don't have to remain anymore in the butching and the complaining or the dark worlds. There are ways to think, whether it's in the box or out of the box. And the people I see on the screen today are just such a fabulous mix. Thank you all. I hope you can go back to an interesting rest of Monday. I know my head's going to be very preoccupied. We will be in touch with you about this ongoing conversation. Thanks to all of you. Litrot.
Thank you.
תודה רבה.
Shalom.
Thank you.
Many thanks.